Okay, so I haven't done these in a little bit, but this is gonna be a book review, book talk type of thing. I'm gonna go over some of the books I've read recently. A book that I never reviewed on here that I read probably end of beginning of this year or end of last year, and then the book I'm currently reading. So the first book I'm gonna be talking about is this. It's very closer to here. The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Hemingway was a very famous author. Old Man and the Sea is also regarded as a classic. This one's a little bit less known. I don't actually remember who recommended me this book. It was a YouTuber that had nothing to do with literature, which was part of the reason why I bought it, because at the time I wasn't reading at all. This was like the book that kind of got me back into reading. I used to read a lot as a child, a lot. Um, and so this is just a book I read a while ago, but that I never reviewed on the channel. And this is the book that kind of got me back into reading. It's about 200 pages, just quite short, well written, fictional story about an author that moves to Paris. And that there is a lot of things going on in the story. There's like, a subplot of romance and all those great things. But that it was specifically its description of Paris, the city, in the 1920s was just so so extraordinary, so beautifully written, so mesmerizing that the person actually went to Paris because of this book. And obviously Paris today is nothing like Paris was in the 20s. A lot of people go to Paris and they're often disappointed. They question why the city's so popular and famous, and it's because of how gorgeous the city really was at one point and still is in a lot of areas. And so I wanted to read this book because of that. I'm a person who likes traveling, and there's something about seeing a city for the first time. And the story was actually so much better than I expected. There's this great thing that happens where you have the subplot of romance, but it never feels forced. The main character is very intriguing, interesting, and the dynamic between him and there's this other character, and they're all kind of fighting for this woman's love, but they're not honest. But all of them are kind of pretending like they're not that invested. They're kind of just going off a whim, but they're still putting in effort for them to be the ones. And she's all over the place, and it's this whole thing, and it's really good. It's really good. It's fiction, but I've heard that other Hemingway works aren't often as celebrated. I do want to read A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, but I have been told that his classic novel Old Man and the Sea is not that interesting, and even though it's short, it's quite jarring. That it's a poor man's Moby Dick. That it's a shorter Moby Dick and a less boring Moby Dick. So I will definitely read A Farewell to Arms just because of how good this book was. It was very good. It's not like out of this world, like it's gonna change your life, but very enjoyable read and a great description of Paris. And it does kind of make you fall in love with Paris. The next book that I read, I'm not gonna go in order that I read. I'll go to this book next, and this is an epic poem by Dante, the famous Dante. And these descriptions are so immersive, and it really makes you think about that would actually look like. Things like a lake being so frozen that the ice looks like glass. He describes one of the layers as the smell and how horrid the smell was in such a way that it really makes you think about how awful hell must be. And so for the understanding of what sins he categorizes in each layer of hell and how people fell that far and the lessons he learns from the people when he speaks to them, all that stuff is why this book is great. Where this book falls short, in my opinion, is that a lot of your understanding and appreciation comes down to your knowledge of the political climate of Florence at the time that he wrote this. And I don't have any information about that. He mentions countless politicians who end up in hell because of their corrupt ways and the awful things they did. There are some very significant figures that everyone would know, like Judas from the Bible, who betrays Jesus. But other than that, a lot of the value is lost because you don't know what these people did in their lives, and what caused them to be notoriously so evil that it lands them in hell. And so when he talks to them, and there's so many analogies and metaphors, you miss a lot of those. Okay, next thing. We have The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. This is my first Mishima work. This is by Yukio Mishima. This is the first novel I've ever read from him. He is actually PewDiePie's favorite author, and that's how I found out about him. Follows a boy in Japan, and this boy is not an ordinary boy because he's actually part of this like philosophical gang. Yeah, I know, sounds crazy. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea is this extraordinarily bizarre story that follows a boy who is part of this philosophical gang. And we see the world through originally his obsession with the sea and how that brings him to meet his mother's lover, and how his dynamic changes and how he feels about that since, you know, his mom was a widow and his father is no longer there. And so it's a coming of age story that's unique and that's nothing like I've ever seen before. And we get to experience his gang's influence on him and how it changes his outlook on life. And it's reminiscent of how when we are teenagers, and it's very specific and niche things might influence us and change our outtake in life that are completely from somebody else. And it's a story that really is bizarre. It's hard to grasp exactly what the point of it is, but as you go along, it's so hard to put down. It's a story that's very immersive, and you're just waiting to see how it ends. And it really is a final punch of an ending. So there's 2 more books that I've read recently in the past week or so. I think actually less than that. But one of them is this, Almond. Almond is by a South Korean author, Won-pyung. And this is her debut book, and what a debut it was. It's a profound story, but it's also heartwarming towards the end. You know, it's bittersweet, and it just keeps you on its toes. It's the strongest first page that I've ever read from a book. This is a book about relationships and friendships, and through a character that doesn't have feelings, we understand the emotion so much more because he provides a perspective that really lays it out plain and simply. But the other characters around him are so full of emotion that the contrast teaches us so much about these dynamics and what they're really like in real life. And it took a boy that doesn't feel anything to teach the people around him how to truly express how they feel. And so for that reason, throughout the book, you just see the main character's influence on the other characters. It's really, really good. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of the best books I've read in a long time. The next book I don't actually have with me right now, somewhere else. But the next book is actually These Small Things by Claire Keegan. It takes place in Ireland. And it's in the winter. It's Christmas time. And the description of the winter in the small city is beautiful. It really sets the mood. It's immersive. And it creates this fantastic background where you can immediately transport yourself in. And you experience the world through Forlong, who's the main character. He's a father. He has 3 daughters. And it's about his struggle with a world that doesn't make sense to him, where he's trying to figure out what the appropriate response to things are, what the moral response to things are. And he's constantly battling with himself, deciding whether he can live with allowing some things to be the way they are, even though he doesn't understand them and he feels like there's something wrong with them, or whether he should step in and do something about them. And through this journey, you are allowed inside of his head. And it provides for some of the best introspection and retrospection that I have seen from a character. And he feels so tangible and real, even if he isn't relatable to you. I found some of his thoughts quite relatable. And you have respect for him. Even if he isn't relatable, he's a character you have respect for. So you're watching him go through this. And Claire Keegan does such a great job of making this feel like it's a mystery thriller. Like he's in danger, or like the world could change. And because it's fiction, you don't know what could happen. It's nothing supernatural, but you're always on the edge of your seat waiting. And it's such a short and thin book at only around 125 pages. So her ability to develop such a dense world, incredible world building for the amount of pages, a character that's so respectable and diverse in thought, in a family that feels so real in a world that's so immersive, and then to provide a final punch that the last few pages are, that really send a message to how we should live our lives. It's truly a fantastic piece of work, and I definitely will be reading Claire Keaton's other very famous work, which is Forster. I'm currently reading Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro, and so as soon as I finish this, I'll try to put a review of it out. Yeah, thank you for watching. That was all. Let me know your thoughts on any books if you've read any of them. If you're interested in reading any of those and you have questions, feel free to ask. I'd love to talk about them.